Hi everyone, I'm very happy to be here today to give you 10 things to know to improve your visibility in Spotify search results. In this presentation, I will share exclusive insights we discovered through a unique study. I hope that everything is working. You can hear me correctly. For your information, I will answer a few questions at the end of this webinar. So feel free to ask them in the section on the right. And for your information also, in the discussion space, David and Lauren from the Ausha team, the incredible Ausha team, are also present and can also answer your question. So, I'm Max. I am the CEO and co-founder at Ausha. First of all, Ausha is the new generation hosting audience platform, for audience growth. And I will say that our mission is clear and straightforward. We are here to help you grow your audience. And we are definitely obsessed with audience growth. That is why it's so essential for us to understand the key acquisition channels for finding new listeners. And thanks to this study by the media, the podcast host, we know that 30% of podcasts are discovered directly within the podcast apps by listeners. It's the first acquisition channels. But the question is, what do they do once they are in a podcast app? Do they browse categories or look at the recommendations on the homepage? Well, the first way they discover a new podcast is by using the search bar. 58% of listeners who are looking for a new podcast in an app use the search bar to do so. This shows how crucial it is to be visible in podcast app search results. So, now that we have covered that, let's take a look at how search works according to Spotify. Search results are based on three main criteria. The first one is metadata. Metadata is the information linked to your show or episodes, such as the title or description. If you use the right keyword here, you will be more visible in search results. The second one is user behavior. Spotify analyzes user behavior after a search. If after searching you start playing a podcast or follow it, this shows that the result is relevant to your search. As a result, Spotify will be more likely to display it higher next time. And finally, user recommendations. Spotify knows what you listen to and the podcast you follow. Based on this, Spotify will tailor search results to show you content you better matches your preferences. You can see that influencing the last two criteria isn't simple. But, of course, improving your metadata is something anyone can do easily. So here is the difference between Apple Podcast and Spotify. So like you can see, on Apple Podcast, you will see only search suggestions, and after a click, you will see the result. On Spotify, you will also see search suggestions, but you can also see podcast suggestions every time you type a new letter. But for your information, This is wrong because now with the new version of iOS 18, you will now have the same type of search on Apple Podcasts. So you will see in the same time search suggestions and in the same time podcast suggestions. But more important, on Apple Podcast, everyone gets the same results for a given keyword. And of course, this is not the case on Spotify, where the results are different for each user. At the beginning of the year, we launched a groundbreaking new tool, the PSO Control Panel, PSO for Podcast Search Optimization. It's the only tool in the world that can track your visibility in search results on Apple Podcast and Spotify. So I will talk more about PSO Control Panel later, but thanks to this tool, we were able to conduct this exclusive study, and I am about to share the results with you. The goal of this study is to understand the impact that podcast metadata can have on its ranking in Spotify's search results. With the PSO Control Panel, we were able to analyze 1,000 searches. Each search used a different keyword. So a keyword is a word or phrase that a potential listener might type to find a new podcast. Here are a few examples of keywords we researched to analyze the results. In total, across these 1,000 keywords, we analyzed 100,000 search results, as each search returns 100 results. These 100,000 results correspond to 70,000 different shows. So we also analyzed the episodes of these shows, which adds up to a bit over 8 million episodes. For each of these shows and episodes, we analyzed the content of their titles, descriptions, and all the information that seemed relevant to us, such as the date of the most recent publication. It's always important for me to point this out. What we have done here is look for correlations between podcast metadata and their ranking in search results. But a correlation doesn't necessarily imply causation. So we need to be careful when analyzing this data. So now that this has been said, let's dive into the results. So we started by studying the impact of having the search keyword in the name of the podcast. The impact seems significant. In every search we conducted, 67% of the podcasts in the results had the search keyword in their show name. It also seems to influence ranking when looking at just the top 10 results. 74% of them also had the keyword in their show name. So, of course, here my recommendation for you, but it's pretty obvious when we work with metadata, but my first recommendation is to be sure that you had the most important keyword in your show name. One of Spotify's recommendations is to avoid generic words in your show names. So generic words, for example, it's words like podcast and or the. So we tested this hypothesis, and as you can see here in this bar chart, it shows, so this bar chart shows the average position of podcast based on the number of generic keywords they have in their podcast name. So for example, the first bar that you can see here is the hypothesis is they don't have. It's 0, they don't have any generic words. And as you can see, the average position here is almost more than 46. And yeah, we can see that more you have generic word in your show name, more your average position is higher, so less good. So it seems to be true here. Podcasts that avoid these words in their show name improve their average position by 4. So next, we analyzed the show description. Here, the idea was to see the impact of the average position of podcast based on how many times the search keyword appeared in their description. You can see that in this chart. On the y-axis, we have the average position of the podcast, and you will notice that it decreases as the number of keyword occurrences in the description increases. In total, you can improve your average position by 5 by using the search keyword at least 5 times in your show description. So it's important to add relevant keywords in your show description if you want to improve your visibility in Spotify. One of Spotify's recommendations is to keep your description short. In reality, we didn't see any significant impact between the length of the description and the average ranking of podcast. On the contrary, I believe it's important to take advantage of this space to include as many relevant keywords as possible. The key is to use keywords that are meaningful for the discovery of your podcast. Oh, okay. So the following insight is probably one of the most interesting discoveries I have made about Spotify. So let's take a look at the chart together. As always, the results show the average ranking of podcasts in search results. These results are based on the date of the latest episode publication. In the first column, we have podcasts that published within the last 15 days. The next column shows those that published between 15 and 30 days ago, and so on. So immediately, it's quite clear. Podcasts that have published within the last 15 days improve their ranking by an average of 5 positions. But that is not the most interesting part here. Look at the green curve. It represents the percentage of podcasts we analyzed in our results based on their publication date. The y-axis for this curve is on the right side. And it's quite striking. 68% of the podcasts from our 1,000 searches, so 2/3 of the podcast, published an episode within the last 15 days. This clearly shows how much Spotify favors shows that have recently published an episode. Of course, we could ask if this approach, which favors recent content, is really good. After all, podcasts often have content that can be timeless, like fiction or story and other one. So that is very interesting if you want to improve your visibility on Spotify. Clearly, it's important to have very good metadata in your show, in your episode, but it's also important to be sure that you have a good publication frequency if you want to be sure that your podcast will be in the top results. So let's talk about some other of our other findings here. So we just talked about the last publication date and its impact. But the other significant factor is your metadata. 95% of the podcast in the top 10 search results use the search keyword at least once in their metadata. So even if your show is popular, without the right keywords, you won't be visible. Among our other findings, we noticed that the number of episodes seems to have an impact. However, this could also be related to the importance of publishing regularly. If you publish frequently, your number of episodes will naturally be higher than average. On the other hand, the type of your show, whether you have an episodic or serial podcast, doesn't seem to have a significant effect on your ranking. More surprisingly, having explicit content doesn't appear to impact your ranking either. This is surprising because on other search engines like YouTube or Google, it usually doesn't affect. And finally, and quite unexpectedly, the show's author name doesn't seem to be used in search rankings. At least we didn't find any correlation with podcast ranking. So here is a summary of my recommendations to improve your visibility on Spotify. So first, the description of your show. Try to repeat your most important keywords at least 5 times in your description. Use different keywords. The length of your description, your show notes, doesn't affect your ranking. So try to include as many relevant keywords as possible to expand your visibility. Publish regularly. Ideally, release an episode every 2 weeks to stay visible in Spotify's search results. Edit the name of your show to include the most important keywords for your podcast. And avoid any generic words in the name of your show, such as podcast and the pod, etc. So now, if you follow my recommendations, you will face one of Peter Drucker's key points. If you can't measure it, you can't improve it. So it's crucial to set up a system that will allow you to track the success of your changes. That is why we created the PSO Control Panel, a complete tool to track your podcast ranking in Spotify and Apple Podcast search results. With the PSO Control Panel, you will be able to track the keywords that truly matter to you. Plus, with our AI assistant, you will receive keyword recommendations you can use. Even better, this assistant can tell you which keywords you are already ranking for. The PSO Control Panel gives you a complete dashboard to view all your visibility results at a glance. You will also have a detailed view showing your current ranking for each of your keywords and the evolution over the past 7 days. Additionally, you will see metrics like the difficulty score, the search volume, helping you better prioritize each keyword. In upcoming improvements, you will soon be able to use live search, and certainly I think next month is okay. A tool that will allow you to create your own searches and immediately see the results for a given keyword. You will also be able to see all your competitors for a specific keyword. Oh, another feature arriving soon on Ausha is the PSO score. This feature helps you optimize your metadata as soon as you publish a new episode. You will receive instant recommendations on your episode's title, description to enhance its visibility in search results. And the good news is that the PSO Control Panel is now available. You don't need to host your content on Ausha to use it. It's simple to use and extremely easy to connect. So let's talk about one of our use cases that I would like to share with you. So this podcast, What Fresh Hell? So it's a podcast featuring two funny moms, Margaret and Amy, who discuss parenting among the other topic. So I helped Amy and Margaret to optimize their metadata and better define their keyword to enhance their visibility in search results. And so we saw some good results after this optimization, obviously. One of our example here, it's with the keyword parenting. Of course, definitely a very important keyword for them. So, for example, on Apple Podcast, they gained 17 positions on Apple Podcast. But more important, they weren't visible at all on Spotify before our optimizations. And after that, they climbed up to the 15th position. That is very spectacular here. Another example, again, that is definitely an important keyword for them, the keyword moms. And on this keyword, she wasn't at all visible on Spotify and Apple Podcast. After our optimization, she became visible in 26th position on Apple Podcast and 14th on Spotify. Again, that is very incredible increase that we can saw here. And the most important keyword, when I asked to Amy and Margaret what could be the most important, the most relevant keyword to define your content, and their answer was, it's definitely funny moms, because it's a good description about what we do. And before our optimization, she wasn't at all visible on this keyword. And after that, they became in first position on Spotify on this keyword. But of course, all of this optimization and all of these improvements are only important in the way to increase downloads. And so it's what we saw also with Margaret and Amy. After all of these optimizations and new rankings, Amy and Margaret observed a 23% increase in their download over a 1 month period. So this is clearly significant growth, which we were able to achieve by focusing on a relevant keyword with a good search volume. So to wrap up, let me remind you what Ausha is. So first, our mission is to empower podcast publishers to reach their full potential and to make podcasting easier and more accessible to all. We support over 11,000 podcasts worldwide, whether you are brand, agency, network, or studio. We provide a wide range of professional services for every stage of your podcast journey, from hosting to audience growth. I think that's all for me. Thank you very much for your attention. It was a pleasure. I think we have a few minutes. If you have any question, I will be really happy to answer to it. So I think we have a first question from Doug Dons. Hi, Doug. Are there any metrics for the level of success if you place the keyword for your podcast at the beginning of your show name as opposed to word 2, 3, or 4 in your show name? Both Apple and Spotify seem to offer recommendations before the person has finished typing their search. It's a good question. We didn't notice for now any result about that. But no, I prefer to say you, Doug. We didn't notice anything about that, but it's definitely something that we want to check in our database, because it's definitely something that we can do with the PSO Control Panel. So it's a good question. Thank you. We will check this, and we will say you in the next webinar or in the next analysis that we will do. Maybe another question. I see, David, you will propose to me a new question. Oh, okay, it's coming. It's coming. I saw a question from Maxime. Okay, Mark, what AI platform is used to identify relevant keywords? Oh, it's very simple. We use for all of our for all Ausha intelligence, we use each time the same. The best for me, it's OpenAI, GPT-4. It's certainly the most powerful AI on the market today, and we use that to give you some relevant keywords. So, Mike, your question is: does using the ranking dashboard require migrating hosting to Ausha, or is there a plan available with other podcast hosts? So yeah, definitely, it's definitely possible to use our complete PSO Control Panel with all our metrics that we can share with you without host your content on Ausha. So it's definitely possible. For now, it's not available online. If you are interested by this, you have to contact us directly by our mail, or it's just contact us by hello@ausha.co, or come on our website, and in the enterprise part, you can book a meeting with us. And I think I think we are good here. So I hope you learned some new information about to Spotify search results. It was a pleasure to do this presentation with you. Don't hesitate to let me feedback about your thought on this presentation, and see you soon. Thank you very much. See you.